Artificial intelligence is fueling one of the biggest technological races in history. But behind every AI breakthrough are massive data centers that require enormous amounts of electricity, water, and infrastructure. Now, New York has paused approvals for new AI data centers, saying the state needs stronger environmental safeguards first. Supporters call it responsible planning. Critics say it risks America's leadership in AI. So the question is, can we expand AI without sacrificing the environment?
Well, New York just became the first U.S. state to impose a data center moratorium. On Tuesday, Governor Kathy Hochul signed an executive order pausing environmental permits for large data centers for 1 year. Now, she says the delay would give state officials time to create new rules to protect the electrical grid, the environment, and communities where developers want to build these centers. President Trump criticized the legislation on social media. He argued data centers are, quote, one of the biggest driving forces in the future for jobs, and that both the taxes and the jobs amount to liquid gold.
States should block new AI data centers unless developers show they will limit carbon emissions and avoid straining local water supplies.
Another one I figured we'd all agree on. I am all for AI and data centers and leading the world in AI. I know it's become kind of left-wing coded to be like against AI, but I'm all for it. I think we should be leading the charge in AI, and AI is the future, but so is green energy and so is climate policy. And I don't know why we would have any innovation without making sure it doesn't have a harmful net negative to our environment. I don't care if it's a Chick-fil-A or a data center. Why would we not innovate anything without making sure it's not harming our environment?
I think when it comes to like the emissions aspect, I think people overplay how significant AI data centers are compared to things like the water usage for livestock. And I mean, the energy that we see expended in a majority of our society is not, I mean, that already is exacerbated. And AI, while yes, it is increasing that, is more of a drop in the bucket compared to the overall consumption that the United States participates in. But I do think that when it comes to things like water quality or air quality, we're seeing this happen in especially rural America, conservative places that loved Donald Trump, that said, we want more innovation, we want to make sure that we're leading this charge, and are seeing the consequences of what reckless acceleration of that looks like without proper mitigation measures. And I think that we got to make sure that these people are protected, their water isn't being polluted, and these people feel like they can go outside without hearing the hum of a data center that's 2 miles from them.
But it's like white noise.
Here's the thing. I think
It's actually, like, honestly, and I know you're joking, but it could be considered like aspects of torture for a lot of people. It's the same reason why, homeless measures where they play the rings to try to push people out of certain places. I mean, that's happening in places AI data centers are being built near, and that's incredibly troubling.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think it should be developed cautiously, obviously looking at the environmental impact, but at the same time, the more limitations you put on development, the more going to be restricting how quickly things develop and how.
What's that should be in place?
I mean, it should definitely not look the way that California looks whenever we're trying to do any sort of change here. Going through years, like the bullet train.
No.
Using an example.
Yeah, you're talking about red tape.
But we spent literally tens of millions of dollars on surveys. We spent on surveys instead of actually building tracks. So that's a sort of obstructing environmental policy that prevents development, right? And that's what I don't want to happen with these sorts of AI centers.
Can I ask my question?
Understand. I'm concerned with water, like 1 to 5 million gallons a day, I think, for some of these AI centers.
Well, I ceded that point. I don't think it's as big of a deal as like
there's
livestock
also,
cultivation.
of course, but there's all cooling techniques. There's also different kinds of chips.
Again, can I ask my question?
Go ahead.
Because I just want to hear your perspective. You mentioned that there should be caution when it comes to building this for the water quality of people, not water usage.
Not water quality. I just said environmental impact.
So you think in Georgia, where people are getting yellow water come from their tap, that's not of a concern to the American people?
That's not what I said.
Okay, well, do you think that is a concern?
Yes.
So I said that's why you prevent that.
Listen, I said that's why you develop it and you maintain caution and you observe what's happening.
So what is the caution? Is it just the altruism of AI data center investors? Is it Kevin O'Leary?
No, but we're not Georgia. We're talking about New York. It's a whole different scenario.
New York is the blueprint for what other states are trying to implement. That's why New York's being brought up.
But they're using specifically what seems to be very broad environmental policy to block development.
Okay.
And that's what I don't think good.
Just to confirm, I don't want to mischaracterize you.
If there's something like the Georgia case, like what you said, where the water is like yellow, then yes, you should put a pause. You should see what's happening. You should investigate.
How does that pause get implemented? Is it legislation, or is it just hoping that the
No, it's
investors
just
will be
local
nicer?
oversight.
Let me jump in because I think we're in broad agreement, even if we can't articulate it that way. But I think if the way you've articulated it would make me want to change my color to green. Because I agree, there was a study by Fortune, and it showed that 92% of all new GDP in the first half of 2025 was related to expenditures in AI. AI is the future. We can say, is that good? Is that bad? It's irrelevant because it is the future. In fact, it's already here. The majority of, let me backtrack, one of the reasons why our economy is doing so well, even though there's stubborn inflation, is actually because of AI. And I say that selfishly as an NVIDIA investor. Having said that, though, we are all concerned about, yes, the quality of our air, the quality of our water. It's also true, to your point, our water usage pertaining to almonds, our water usage pertaining to golf courses, our water usage pertaining to livestock, far and above exceeds what we do with AI, especially because most of the AI water that's being used is being recycled. Now, we do have to have local ordinances. We have to have zoning laws and review boards in the same way that any building that's ever being constructed in any town or any city goes through the same local ordinances. What is really problematic is for states like New York to say, you know what, we're just not going to compete at all. We're not going to review anything because it's just all bad. China and Russia are begging for our legislators to do that thing because that will kill our economy. And as it pertains to climate change, I actually say this quite openly as a conservative, climate change, of course, is man-made. Of course, I mean, there are also climate change that's natural,
said
but
we all
climate change
agree on
is
that.
a threat. Climate change is a threat to human civilization. It's a threat to our American infrastructure. And I wish that the conservative movement, and I actually think they'll win a lot more votes, they would take that issue far more seriously. I just don't
my
see
God,
AI
bro,
data
stop.
centers
That's what
as
I was
being a
gonna
threat
say.
to
But what
that
I
thing.
see,
Stop
the
it.
reason why I brought up the water example is because we're seeing what the status quo does. Obviously, there needs to be a difference in policy when it comes to making sure that these communities are protected. Because the way we're doing it right now is not working.
No,
That's
What
the
are you
difference.
talking about? We're discussing New York literally blocking developing. That's not enough?
Hold up.
What do you want to do?
Can we change
I'm
this real quick?
specifically
What-
talking
just-
about examples that are real. These aren't made up scenarios where I'm
Right,
saying it
I know,
could
but
happen.
to your point,
I'm
there-
saying in Georgia,
Correct.
people cannot drink water.
But there-
That is a concern.
Correct,
They
but to
can't
your
drink
point,
water?
there are examples.
Yes, from their tap. They can't drink water.
But to your point, there are those are examples, they're not the rule. So too, when fracking was being established about 10, 20 years ago, there were major problems also in Georgia. And then there were rules and regulations and local ordinances set in place because that's the smart way to build efficient government. Not what you're doing right now, which is just ceding all of AI advancements to our adversaries.
I don't
because if
like
we
I told
lose
you,
the
I don't
AI
think we should
race,
do that.
our economy
I
and
don't
all
think
those
we should
people
do
in
that.
Georgia, they suffer.
But you said we all agree on the environmental impact should be taken into account. I'm not convinced we all agree, even at this table. Certainly the Republican Party does not agree on that. You know
we
why?
as four.
Do you agree on that? I think
Agree
it's us
on
three.
what?
On is climate change man-made
No,
and
that's not what
happening
you
and the
said.
threat?
Hang on. I said we all
Listen,
agree on.
Jay,
I said we all
I
agree.
don't.
No,
Well,
that's not what I
climate
said.
change and impact. You know who doesn't care about
wait,
environmental
Donald
impact?
Trump 2020. I get it. But
No,
when
Donald
my point
Trump-
was that environmental regulations and something we all four agree.
There is one person in this government who is doing everything he can to actively roll back all of the climate change policy, like the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the green energy subsidies and initiatives that the Biden administration tried to do. There is one party, there's one person who says climate change is a hoax. That is our president of the United States right now, and is head of the EPA, the Environmental
As it
Protection
is,
Agency.
you know, can I tell you something?
The head of the Environmental Protection Agency said, we are going to drive a dagger through the heart of the climate change religion. These people are so fundamentally
Listen,
unserious about protecting
well,
the environment.
Listen,
You're referring
Janet,
to
here's the thing. I actually agree with him. I mean, you have doctors like Dr. Judith Curry, who used to be at Georgia Tech and lost her position because she dared question the scientific consensus. And she has shown, not just her, but there are numerous scientists that have shown that it's extremely overstated.
That's not really what I said.
The warming. Well,
we can debate on what
Yeah,
to do about it.
if I can go back to your point about Lee Zeldin, because he was not saying we're therefore not going to treat the climate seriously. And again, climate change is man-made, and I think we have to have
he said
strong
it was
federal
real.
legislation. What he was discussing is the fact
That's
that
not
in
even a real
2020, for
conclusion that it's
example,
man-made.
let me finish the point. In 2020, for example, you had Bernie Sanders on the stage of the Democratic presidential debate saying that our civilization had 7 years left to exist.
Overstated,
You have
yes.
young people reporting feelings of eco-anxiety because they think that our society is going to collapse.
Overstated.
That is what Lee Zeldin is
Zeldin
referring
and Scott
to.
Pruitt and
So
all these
I
people,
think,
they rolled
so
back
I think,
the-
let me just finish.
Al
I think we can have policy
Greta
while
Thunberg.
also
Donald
not
Trump,
scaring
they're
people. So when
rolling
Al
back
Gore
the
says,
policy.
when he made the truth in the early 2000s, and then in 25-year retrospect, he said all of our predictions were right. He said in 2025, Miami would be underwater.
Chavez,
That's
if
not
you're
true.
running for president,
and it's
then we
silly
can
to
have-
say that.
Hey,
thing.
if you're
And you
running
know
for
what?
president-
He made $130 million off of that.
Dennis, if you're running for president, then we can have sound potential discussions on climate policy. But the problem is with our current administration, we can't percent. They rolled the 2009 endangerment finding, which all it said was that greenhouse gases are harmful to health, something we've known about for 100 years. They rolled that back and they said that's not true, so now cars can emit as much greenhouse gases as they want. They are fundamentally anti-science.
That was a Supreme Court ruling of West Virginia versus, I think it was Chevron or something. So that wasn't actually the executive decision. That was from the Supreme Court themselves.
Okay,
but
so
I agree with you.
No,
because by that point, it was not the majority of people on the court at the time were not President Trump appointees. In fact, that decision, you can fact check me because I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that decision came out under Obama's term. You can fact check me. I'm almost positive it was in 2015 under Obama.
No,
The debate centered on New York's temporary pause on large AI data centers. Supporters argued the delay gives regulators time to protect local communities, water supplies, and the electrical grid. Opponents warned that slowing AI infrastructure could hurt economic growth and allow countries like China to pull ahead. While nearly everyone agreed AI is the future, they disagreed on how much regulation is necessary before innovation is slowed too much.
You just said
I don't know. They rolled back under Trump. They rolled back the endangerment finding.
Again, I agree with you that President Trump has policies pertaining to the climate that I don't agree with. But to be fair, if we truly want to,
inverted. It's not just
it's
like
not
we don't
fundamentally.
agree. It's fundamentally we do not environment. We are going.
No, that's not true.
No, that's absolutely not. When he was running for office, he actually ran on a platform.
The guy who called climate change a hoax.
I mean, you can believe that climate change is a hoax, but you can still have a priority of having clean air and clean water, which were two of his campaign promises.
How do you feel about Donald Trump selling millions of acres of national land in order to include more drilling projects?
Yeah, as I've repeatedly stated, I don't like his climate policies.
He just did that a week ago.
Yeah,
so how can you
again?
say that
Let me explain.
I agree that it sounds like you are being consistent in the way that you're saying you want to protect the environment and you disagree with some conservative policy.
And put it on Twitter.
But just for that part, I'm saying
for
you. I'm
Screw
saying
you.
For you. You're saying that how can you have the incongruency of saying climate change isn't real, but also saying he's protecting the environment when he's literally selling off part of our protected land for drilling?
Let me clarify my position a bit, because I do believe that it's become extremely politicized. Is climate change real? Yeah, I wake up in the morning, the weather is different than it is in the evening. Hey, listen, I know. Listen, I'm just saying that in observational terms, yeah, it's real. Okay. In scientific terms, is there a lot of skepticism? Is that skepticism?
Nope.
No?
No, there's skepticism, but not credible skepticism.
Yes.
Not skepticism.
Only on what to do about it, not whether it exists.
You know, I remember back in the 70s when we were expecting an ice age, and then like 10 years later it was like, actually, it's going to turn into a desert. And then all of a sudden we're here. Now we're like, what? I think 5 or 10 years passed when the polar ice caps are supposed to be completely melted.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there's so many organizations that have concluded that, you brought up, I think it's like, what, the 97% of scientists agree. You brought up the one of the 3% who doesn't.
Even that consensus, that scientific consensus was, those numbers are completely fudged.
No, it's not a consensus on what exactly to do about it. That's where.
To be fair, actually, again, I believe that climate change, the majority of which is man-made, and we need to have strong federal policy against it. But to be fair, Dennis actually is right. The 97% study is completely made up. Okay. The 97% of scientists all agree. That's actually not true. The majority of climate scientists do agree. But I think to appeal to authority of like, oh, well, all these other organizations say it's true. No, it's a majority, but it's not even close to 90. But again, I still agree with you, and I disagree with President Trump's handling of, let's say, national resources or national parks. At the same time, though, he has been kind of consistent that I do want clean air, I do want clean water for our people. We disagree about the ways in which
they say drill, baby, drill, and they don't want to invest. They've rolled back all investments, energy, carbon emissions. They've rolled these back.
It's two separate issues. So his is we don't want to subsidize industry. We want the free market to winners and losers. Because if you artificially, let me make the point. If you artificially, the free market actually has done a lot of good, especially if you believe.
You're talking to the guy who defended capitalism. I agree.
Great. So then I don't know why you're
not. So why are you taking an opposing position?
I don't know why you're knocking it.
It's not.
You need regulation.
I want clean energy.
No, you don't.
Regulation is not the same thing as. Hang on. Let me say this. Regulation is not the same thing as a subsidy. I would love it if we had millions of more green energy jobs. I would love it if we had far more solar and wind and air technology than we currently do. I'm making the argument that the best way to get about that is when you have the free market voluntarily realizing that will increase their bottom line, and not the government artificially picking winners and losers, because that literally never works.
You're not going to have that when you have fossil fuel monopolies on the way that our industry is run in this country.
That's not true. Fossil fuels are a finite resource. I mean, already the OPEC countries are screwed because they recognize that they're not going to have a lot of resources in barely 100 years.
Be investing in
renewable energy.
The reason I'm saying it's stupid for us to subsidize is because it's not going to work unless you have a consensus from the public themselves, and that's not there yet. Which is why the best thing to do, I believe,
because the people don't agree the climate.
It's not that people don't agree that climate is changing. It's because people recognize that if people want low energy, what's going to give them low energy costs? Is it going to be solar or is it going to be fossil fuels? And we all know the answer is fossil fuels.
1,000%.
That's why you guys don't like the war in Iran. on because it's closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is kicking up our oil prices.
Nobody's not making an argument that it's going to cost some money to get into green energy.
Of course it will, but the government should not be the one subsidizing it because it's not going to work.
I'll just say real quick, the problem is not that it's going to cost some more money up front. The problem is that the solution is that it's a long-term investment. It's going to cost us far more down the road to not invest in clean energy.
I just hear
not do these things.
I hear conservatives all the time. I hear conservatives all the time say that America should be run like a business. And when you're thinking long-term into the projections of the way that our economy will collapse without fossil fuels, we absolutely should be having more of a priority on that, on the here and now. And part of that is increasing public transportation so people don't rely on as much as energy costs, specifically when it comes to transportation. It's not just that. I know it's not just that. It's the way that our shipping is handled. It's everything. That energy is what makes our economy run. I'm not in that. But the more that we invest in that now, the better we're going to be off in the future when eventually this is going to become unsustainable.
So here's the thing. I disagree with the premise that it should be run as a business because an economy is nowhere near to what an actual business is. When you run a national economy, you're dealing with what he's describing, incentives, you're dealing with hurdles, which are regulations, and different things that can affect the price. If you allow the market to regulate itself, you will end up with technological development that will move beyond the fossil. I know you think it's funny, but we had far more development before we started all these regulations and all of these impediments to competition, which is the purest form. Why do you think China opened up their economy? Because it couldn't run a state-run economy and have the level of development that we had. That's just how it works.
And guess who's leading the green energy charge? China, even though they're still massive polluters.
China. I was going to say China's leading the world in carbon emissions. So
well,
they're actually very bad.
U.S. is actually number one per capita.
No, he just impugned himself as he made his point. That's just, it was hilarious.
I would agree. And they're also doing
they are leading the charging.
Yeah, and how are they doing it? How are they doing it? Through, say it with me, free markets. In fact, Dennis is really accurate when he says, let me just make the point. Dennis he talks about that if you're going to have government subsidies and you're going to have red tape, if you think the fossil fuel monopoly is bad now, just like perverse incentives whereby good intentions lead to bad outcomes due to unforeseen circumstances, if you subsidize the industry now, you will have tremendous perverse incentives. You need the public to be able to decide what is going to lower my energy costs. Right now, it's fossil fuels. If you want it in the same way I want it to be clean energy, then you need to make those arguments to those corporations that the DSA hates. You need to make that argument to the billionaires that the corporations.
So your focus is on.
And by the way,
not on the environment.
Let me provide you a practical example.
Dennis, give me 10 seconds. My focus is on the climate, which is why I'm making the argument the only way we're going to protect the climate is not by the government artificially picking winners and losers. It's by going to all those terrible millionaires and billionaires and corporations that the DSA hates and get them to make investments, get them to create green energy jobs, get them to transition away from fossil fuels. The government will not be able to do it, only the free market can.
The reason why we're seeing this overtake of national lands is because there's a profit incentive to do that. And so when you're thinking of prioritizing the environment, as well as when you're any other elastic good, and we could call even green renewable energy an inelastic good because it is going to be necessary in the future regardless of whether or not we want to accept that. I know some of us at the table do not want to accept that. But we need to make sure that we are taking that profit incentive out of what is necessary for the greater society, which would be green renewable energy.
If you take out the profit incentive environment, you will have effectively killed the environment.
No, because the profit incentive is what's leading to these corporations buying up federal land from the president who wants to give it to
Hold on, wait. This is the typical Marxist, a malicious when after.
So you think it's a good intention that private developers want to buy up American national land?
No, but you're conflating national land, which I already said should be protected, and then just transitioning to a green economy. The two have nothing to do with each other.
You're saying that opening up the market is what's going to lead to better outcomes
Not
for the environment.
Not on national lands. You could do it on the 98% of other
There you go.
lands.
That's what I was saying when he said no regulations. I'm literally calling that point.
Okay, well,
let me provide you a practical example of how regulations just mess it up for the little guy. You guys are Democrats. You stand for the little guy, right? The workers. Right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Glendale.
Right. We stand up for the workers.
We stand up for workers way more than these guys, and you'll find out right now. So, Glendale, are you guys familiar with what's happening in Glendale?
Tell us.
Glendale just built, no, that's Calabasas. So they just built a brand new plant, right? And the city council in Glendale put extreme restrictions on how much power the power plant can generate because they were looking at environmental policy and they were like, hey, we don't want to have this much in emissions. And guess what happened? Over the course of a year, energy prices for the regular person in Glendale went up by like 20-something%. And every year it's estimated to go up between 17 and 25%. And that plant was built specifically with the idea of selling energy to neighboring cities like Burbank or other places so that it could offset the cost for people living in Glendale. So
what you're
this is an example of bad policy, bad regulatory policy.
Do you think
that's
we're arguing
negatively
for bad
affecting-
regulation? Is
I'm
that
just
what you think
he
we're
was
arguing
he
for?
was bringing up the fact that I said no regulations. This kind of
What I'm saying
regulation
is,
that's bad.
I think we can agree that half measures that seek to limit the amount of fossil fuels we use without actually directing towards investing in green renewable energy will not solve the issue. That's why we're saying that there needs to be a fundamental rewriting of what it is that we're investing in when it comes to energy policy, which includes more solar, more wind, and I honestly think more nuclear. I think that nuclear would be able to
I agree
be
with that.
cheaper and more effective.
You know, we have plans for, I think, 3 nuclear plants
the
that
Pope-
we've had for years, and they haven't built it.
I think that specifically when you look at things like recycling measures or lowering your carbon footprint, a lot of this advertisement actually came from the fossil fuel industry. And I think it's because they want to offshore a lot of the blame that they are responsible for to the individual responsibility argument. And while I do think that it's important for people to be conscious, obviously, of what they're doing, I think people should be protecting the environment as much as possible. I think that we should be pointing the finger towards those that are actually exacerbating the crisis, which are those that are profiting from the destruction of the planet.
Yeah, I've actually been a vegetarian for 19 years. Shocker. I know the liberals, it's a vegetarian, but kind of like Mason said, like, you know, certain things like, you know, changing the low flow shower heads on certain people, you know, on certain city ordinances, like they help and I'm all for them. And, you know, but data centers and these things don't pollute nearly as much as these big polluters, big agriculture, big oil and all these things, which are much more, you know, dangerous. So I do recognize that like these corporations need to take some responsibility. It shouldn't just be up to me and you to do these things. That's why we need regulation, because the people can't be trusted by themselves and companies can't be trusted by themselves when profit incentives are high. We do need regulations on things. We need regulations on the environment, we need regulations on guns, and we need regulations on voting. You two only seem to want it on voting.
One thing that I'd say that I think
didn't mention guns at all.
one thing
Happy
I
to have
think-
that debate.
One thing maybe you
Actually,
guys,
I did have that debate. I said I believe in universal background
Republicans,
checks, so not
Republicans
true.
don't want them.
So not you guys,
Wait,
Republicans.
just ask them a
Yeah.
question really quick.
One thing
So
that you would like, I think, maybe getting rid of government subsidy. Honestly, you know, we don't like big government here. I think we should get rid of the subsidy of the meat industry. Personally,
I agree.
That's just me, and I think that you agree. Make
Yeah.
meat more expensive.
I mean, I
Let's
don't
go.
want the government getting involved in deciding what businesses
like
should
subsidies in
thrive
general.
and shouldn't thrive.
Cool.
I think that the market should be allowed to decide for itself. As far as the science goes, we just need a broader conversation. We need to be allowed to have dissenting views without completely losing everything, which happened to Dr. Curry. And at the same time, I think it's important to just keep an eye on how businesses are impacting the environment. Really, that's what my stance would be. I wouldn't want to limit things based on a theory that has been politicized to this effect. I would want to remove political discourse completely from it and just focus on the science of it.
What I would say is while climate change, the majority of which is man-made, I think the only way we get through this is, number one, you have to bring in India and China. Anything that we do without those two countries is irrelevant. That's why President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords, because there was no enforcement mechanism. And then number two, we need to businesses and corporations into the conversation. We need to build them, not scorn them, not denigrate them. That is the only way that we bring about the solutions that you and I want.
Well, we talked about climate change and how some people think it's maybe not so urgent or real, but the rest of us, I think, agreed on its impacts, and we should be doing everything we can to protect the environment. It's just a disagreement on how we go about protecting it. What's the best way to get there? Some people want more regulations, others don't. And personally, I think it makes more sense to regulate our environment than...
The conversation eventually shifted from AI to climate policy itself. One side argued stronger environmental regulations are necessary because businesses won't always protect the environment on their own. The other argued that excessive regulation slows innovation and that free markets are better at driving long-term solutions. What began as a debate over AI data centers became a larger question about the future. Should governments guide technological progress, or should markets lead the way?